Welcome everybody to live pivot tables on Snowflake. I am Will Andrews. I am the head of product and marketing. And we also have with us Steve Shawn, head of tech solutions here at Gigasheet. Today, we're going to show you how to unlock the power of live interactive data directly on Snowflake without writing a single line of code. So key there, no code solution today. Whether you're a data enthusiast, an analyst, or a Snowflake user looking to simplify your workflows, thank you for joining and we'll get started. Gigasheet was founded on the idea of democratizing big data. We want everybody to be a data analyst, and that's actually what everybody wants, right? Users want to find answers on their own, but it's never that easy. Current tools require technical skills and thus put a reliance on IT or a data team because not everyone can write SQL or code, right? How many people in your organization know SQL? And then even beyond SQL, like how many people have serious spreadsheet skills, right? Like that person is going to be very popular and they're going to manage a lot of ad hoc requests from all over. And it's a matter of prioritization. Uh, at Gigasheet, we believe that you shouldn't have to, right? No one should know how to have to do code in order to do data analysis. And furthermore, today's topic is pivot tables. If you do know SQL, um, building a pivot table in SQL or using it for ad hoc analysis, especially to explore columns and change dimensions on the fly, can be very difficult. It's not the right tool for that. So we invented this. This is self-service analytics and an intuitive interface. You can kind of just look here, and we're going to go into more detail later, obviously, but you can kind of tell what's going on, right? We've grouped some data, we're expanding it, we're looking at the details. Um, because honestly, spreadsheets are ultimately the self-service analytics tool people expect. Now, popular tools like Sheets or Excel are great, but they're woefully inadequate for dealing with warehouse scale. So like Excel caps out at 1 million rows, 16,000 columns. Google Sheet is capped by 10 million cells, which equates to roughly the same, like 1 million rows, 10 columns wide. Not very big at all, but that's the tool that people want to use. Um, what we allow is users to interact with an entire data set, not just slices, and they can get into row level detail. That is the Gigasheet difference. So BI tools that you probably have at your organization like Tableau or Power BI, they're awesome, aggregations, dashboards. But even those tools are not great at pivot tables at large scale. So we know that users want to access the details, right? They're going to have a question, they're going to want to dig in, and that's where Gigasheet comes in. The nice thing is that we have a live integration to Snowflake, so they don't have to be experts. Your business users don't have to be experts at the data warehouse, and they can use Gigasheet to access the data. And meanwhile, your IT department, your data team has control and central governance in place so that they're not worried about anything getting messed up in the data warehouse. So win-win solution. Just a little bit about Gigasheet. Gigasheet has over 150,000 users globally. We have not trained a single one on our platform. It's a very intuitive tool as far as using and editing, and working with big data. We have worked with customers on automation and transformations, things like that. So we do offer services and can help you out with custom projects. But we really make big data spreadsheet easy. That's the goal of Gigasheet, and that's what we do. So let's just start with your average business user. This would be me prior to Gigasheet, right? I worked in a product marketing department and would often, look at sales of SKUs or adoption of a product feature. And, we had a whole BI team, but getting access to the data was a challenge. They would, sometimes allow someone like me to connect with Excel to a database, and you would set the thing up and it would run overnight, and Excel just freezes. It looks like it's not doing anything. It really was. Um, but, it really wasn't a data product I was building. I was able to get an answer, but then everyone sort of had to trust that Will had done it right. And that was a very, interesting topic. Like I thought the answer was right, but did it match the dashboard? Had I manipulated the data, right? And so as a business user, you know that there's the dashboard, there's the data, give me the data. And then once you see the data, sometimes there's gremlins there, right? And what we really want is we want access to the data in a way that we can have it approved or share with other people within the organization so that it's not a one-off Um, it's not a one-off analysis. And the other thing that you're doing when you do something like that is you're creating um, tech debt, right? Like you're creating these islands of information where I might go and do an analysis, a one-off thing in a spreadsheet with a subset of data, and I'm trying to get my answer. And then, the next month comes around and it's like, well, what does that look like now? And you either got to go rebuild the whole thing or it's never refreshed, right? Like there's just not enough bandwidth to do that. So you create copies of data, you create islands of tech debt. It doesn't match. What we really want to do is empower our business units, right? How do we just give me the data in the right way? And the right way is a tool like Gigasheet, which allows row level details and analysis where you can save your analysis, you can share your analysis. Virtually no training is required. Anyone can use it, like we've said. There's no installation or maintenance, right? This is set up on your data warehouse. You connect, and then you can roll it out to your users, and they can analyze billions of rows without setting up a tech stack, anything to install on their PC. And it offers no-code data analytics. So single-click answers to common data problems is what we're trying to do. Aggregations, grouping, deduplication. The aggregations of the grouping are exactly what you do in a pivot table, and Steve's going to walk us through that here in a minute. So here we go. This is Gigasheet. We'll see it a little bit closer. I do want to spend 1 minute before we jump into some more details, talking about our integration with data warehouses. So Gigasheet works with many data warehouses. So this webinar is about Snowflake. We're going to look at Snowflake, but Databricks, MySQL, all sorts of data stores. We also can connect to CRMs, other applications. So your Salesforce instance, um, HubSpot, things like that, right? Gigasheet can pull in data from those repositories. Gigasheet offers two different ways to connect to a data warehouse. One that we're going to look at today is this live query mode where the data is all real time and we're just going to go kind of explore the data warehouse without making a copy. But we do have a managed mode for replication. So if you want to allow your business users to edit some of the data, they can make a copy and we can schedule the copy of the data and you control all that. Your IT team sets up the for data retention policies. It is a full enterprise solution. But what we're talking about today is the live query mode, as we call it, and we'll see that we interact with the data in our spreadsheet-like UI, and that ensures data integrity, right? So we're not going to actually edit any of the underlying data. Our data analysis team, data analysts are going to be happy. They're going to get the data they need, and IT is going to be happy because nothing's going to get changed. Now, if you're using the managed mode, we also offer audit logs to document changes, and we have data retention policies, as I mentioned. So a little preview, but let's get to what you came here for, which is to see live queries on Snowflake data. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve as the demo portion of this. And, you know, just to set the stage, Steve's going to be a business analyst performing a data exploration, looking for trends in some quarter data. And he's got a big data set. So 80 million rows of transaction data. This is a very real thing at a company. 80 million rows seems like a lot, but, that if you're dealing with transactions or SKUs or anything where data is repeated, this is really not that big of a data set. It is 80 times too big for Excel, though. So we're going to do pivot tables as we would in um, Excel, but we're going to do them in Gigasheet. So Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen here. And all right, you should be able to see this. Here we go. Live demos. What can go wrong? So my name's Steve. I run technical solutions here at Gigasheet. I'm talking to you from chilly Arlington, Virginia today. And we are going to start, before we get into the Gigasheet part, with Snowflake. So this is Snowflake that I've already logged into here, and you can see I've got my tables underneath this database, and this is unfriendly. This is not the kind of thing that you would give, people in marketing, people in sales, people doing basic business analysis, access to, because in Snowflake, you're probably going to be streaming in data. And the people who are managing this Snowflake instance, they think in terms of data. They think in terms of what columns are available, what rows are available, what are the types of, is this a timestamp? Is this a date? Those are the questions that they really concern themselves with as they're trying to get the data in fast, accurately, cleanly. But if you're a business person, if you're trying to think in terms of answering questions with this data, you're thinking in terms of like what's in it. At best, you're going to get a data preview here. This data preview is going to give you 100 rows. As you can see, 100 rows of the 80.5 million rows are seen here. So you want to know things like, what product segment, as I scroll through here, you could see the various columns. So like what product segment had the most sales? What customer cohort had the most sales? What product name had the most sales? That's not the kind of thing that the data team inherently thinks through. They can get you that. What they have to do to get you that is you have to probably put in a ticket and they have to write some sort of SQL that looks something like this. And this is the kind of thing that SQL ninjas can churn out, as they go ticket by ticket with a little iteration here and there, and they'll send you the results and you send it back to them and saying, no, I want this instead of that. I want, March instead of April. And back and forth you go. It's not the kind of thing that a business analyst is ever going to write. It just kind of makes their eyelids twitch. It makes my eyelid twitch a little bit. So that's what Gigasheet is trying to solve, getting out of that back and forth SQL game and being able to connect directly to this so that a business analyst can use this and answer those kind of questions at the speed of thought. So jumping into Gigasheet, as was mentioned, we can connect to multiple platforms here. We're talking about Snowflake today, but we could do this in Databricks. We can do this with MySQL or Postgres. We could do this with BigQuery and Redshift and so on. And if you see something here that you want to integrate to that we don't have, please let us know. Please tell us, and we can work on prioritizing that connection as we build these out. We add one or two a month, it seems. It's kind of amazing what our engineering team can do. But as I was mentioning, in this transaction table, there's these 80 million rows. Here's that same transaction table in Gigasheet, 80.5 million rows. But now I have access to all of them. Now I have access and I can paginate through and see all of this data in a spreadsheet-like interface. I see those, remember the product segment and product name and order number and SKU. But now I can filter and sort and group like it's a spreadsheet. But today, especially, what we're talking about are pivot tables. And we're talking about pivot tables because that tends to be one of the main ways for business users to do the kind of dynamic analysis to sort of make connections between the data and understand, what is interesting about this data set. As I'm, make a live connection to this, now I can actually play around with it. Now I can actually answer questions as they come up in my mind and answer one question after another after another. So just as an example, just to talk about what pivot tables are, just for 30 seconds here. Pivot tables are pivot tables are a way in which the values of the columns chosen will form both the columns and the rows and the groups that will be displayed. And the key with pivot tables is you want to use columns that have a low-ish number of unique values. Data people call this cardinality. The key here is like if I see this home automation revenue category, I can come down here and I could say, okay, show me how many unique values there are in that column. And I see there are 3. Under SKU, if I ask for how many unique columns are in these 80 million rows, it'll take a second, but it will bring back the unique value of 52,000 unique values under that SKU column. So that's not the kind of thing that you're going to want to use in a pivot table. You're going to want to use the fields that have a small-ish number of unique values. So as an example of what that would look like, what I can do is I can turn on pivot mode. And sort of like what Will showed in that animated GIF, we can do here. So by default, this product segment got populated into column groups. I'm actually going to make that my rows. So let's make the rows the various values of the product segment field. So you might remember when I scrolled over there, product segment, the values within there were smartphones and wearables and home automation and computers and audio and so on. And for the column within these pivot tables, let's use the customer cohort quarter, which is right here. So I'm going to populate customer cohort, and then for the value to populate the cross-section, essentially, I'm going to use revenue. By default, it's going to choose the sum. If I wanted to, I can get the max and the min and the average and the median and so on. But sum is good for me. But what you see really quickly is on 80 million rows, we quickly produce a pivot table showing quarter by quarter the customer cohort, quarter by quarter, the revenue, the sum of the revenue by product segment. And just on its face, I think that's pretty cool. On its face, being able to pivot like that, 80 million rows, um, might be all you needed to see from this webinar. That said, we can keep going. We can now, first thing I want to show you is I can come over here and I can do a pivot chart. And what I can do here is actually, I'm going to make sure that I've got all showing and then pivot chart. If I do a stacked bar column, I can quickly get a nice visualization of this. We do not consider ourselves a visualization company, but this kind of real quick and easy visualization tool without having to connect to a downstream BI tool often gets you the answer that you need. And you can quickly understand, wearable had the most, and, quarter by quarter, you can kind of compare the entire data set in one simple visual. I can save this. I can use this in other applications and so on. But what I can also do now is I can start working at the speed of thought with this data set. So I see that smartphones have the highest amount of total revenue here. I'm just going to filter this entire data set to just the smartphone category. You'll see behind the scenes, I'm actually going to be building a filter. They are the Gigasheet filters, which are, I believe, our most used product feature. Our ability to do very complex filters on these huge data sets to drill in to exactly what you want to find. But I'm filtering down to that smartphone data set. And now what I want to do is I want to pivot this. I want to move the customer cohorts to be the row groups, and I want to make the product segments the columns. And I'm going to come down here and I see that it's automatically sorted, and that 2015 Q4 is the highest quarter, customer cohort quarter of the highest grossing product segment. So maybe now I just want to filter down to this. And now if I remove this group and this pivot, that kind of quick on the fly analysis, I'm down to 1.2 million of the 80 million rows. In fact, maybe I only want orders that have been placed in, August of this month. I can continue to filter down to specifically this. And now I'm down to 151,000 rows of this entire data set.
And Steve,
So
just to put that in context, so you started with a pivot table, you looked at the aggregations, you saw something you wanted to dig into, just like an analyst would, and now you have followed the filters back to just the values that were in
just
that cell or that box.
exactly, exactly. So I worked with one aggregation, used it to filter to a different aggregation, following just one question, following another. And now I have filtered down to the specific rows that I didn't know I wanted. I didn't know that I wanted, smartphones and this particular customer cohort quarter, the 2015 Q4 customer cohort quarter. I just knew I wanted the biggest of each. But I didn't know, I wouldn't be able to tell the data team that. Like, I would have to tell the data team to do this analysis for me, but instead, they just gave me all the data. I figured out which slice of this data I want. I'm now down to 151,000 rows, which is a much more manageable data set. This could
I
be
love it, and I love the way you said speed of thought, because that's really what this is. Pivot tables are the speed of thought, and there's no back and forth data team. You've got the details you need to dig into the problem here.
exactly. Exactly. So I could just download this as a CSV. This will fit in Excel. This will fit in as a business user. Every business user's favorite tool is Excel. That's why Will loves Excel. Um, but you could just take this now, and this will absolutely fit in Excel. What I can also do is save it back to Snowflake, which is pretty cool. I could take this data set, oh man, and log in, and I could say, okay, I'm going to save it back to that same warehouse. It's going to auto-populate these fields for me as I go through, and I'm just going to call this wearable new to cohort 3. I'm going to export that. And this will only take a second because data has never left Snowflake servers while we've been doing this. Data, we are visualizing Snowflake data, but this entire thing has been happening in what we call live query mode. In live query mode, that data stays on Snowflake servers, but you can work with this, do all these pivots, all these filters, all this sorting, all of this analysis, this dynamic analysis really quickly without data leaving Snowflake servers. Now, if I come over here and press refresh, I can see my wearable to new cohort 3 table. I should have named that a better thing. But now I could see those same columns. It was created just now, and it's only going to have those 151,000 rows available. It's a view, so you're not going to get the total thing, but that's a Snowflake issue. Anyway, so that is how you can do some pivots. I can
Hey, Steve, real fast on that. Just interesting there. So in its essence, you could almost say, Here's the full data set to your business team. They could go find what's interesting and they can save this view. And what it's really done is just written this code that now the data team can go and create a dashboard or, if you had something like problem transactions every month, then the data team can now save this in a dashboard view in your other tool and it could become something standard that the whole company could see, right? And I think that's the benefit of not creating data silos. This is all in the data warehouse. It's just allowing the business user to define what's interesting as, without knowing, right? Like they don't know what's interesting. They're poking around in a pivot mode. They're finding what's interesting. And then there's a way for them to provide it back to the data team and say, hey, look, this is what the business thinks is interesting. So it's very
I,
cool.
I love the term poking around because that literally is what it is. They're kind of going down various alleys, various rabbit holes, trying to figure out what's interesting to them. They're not going to ever tell, someone, hey, write this SQL, because this is the SQL that Gigasheet will write to create this table. This is never something that they'll be able to define themselves. What they'll be able to define is by working with the huge data set in a pivot interface, they'll be able to figure out what is actually important to them. Okay? The one other thing I wanted to show here is we'll use a different data set just to mix things up a little bit here. And here I'm working with online sales records. This is 37 million rows. And again, I can go into a pivot mode and I can choose, say, country for my row group. Instead of customer ID, let's make it revenue again for my value. And for my column, let's make it customer cohort. So again, I now have my various customer cohorts that's in this data set, and I see broken down uh, country by country, which countries are spending the most. Shout out to the United Kingdom, which is clearly the top purchaser here. What I can do is I can save this view. So I'm going to say, this is country by cohort. And I'm going to create this view. This is going to save the presentation of this data in a way that I care about. So therefore, I don't have to keep popping back and recreating this pivot. As data enters Snowflake, I'll be able to come here and see the pivot as I previously set it. I can also, maybe I want to change this to, instead of by customer cohort, maybe I do change it to promo name. And now I see instead of by customer cohort, it's how they came into the tool. So some came in via email promotion, some came in via Google Ads promotion, some didn't have any promotion. They just found it natively. But again, seeing the total revenue broken down country by country in this data set. I can save this view. So I can say country by promotion and create. And what this allows me to do then is as this connection happens, I can jump back and forth and I can, without having to recreate that pivot, without having to go down those rabbit holes and poke at the data like Will was just saying, I'll be able to jump back and forth specifically to the data sets that I cared about, to the visualizations that I cared about, to the presentation that I cared about. In this case, breaking down country by cohort. At a high level, at a high level, this is how pivots in Gigasheet work. We can spend hours on this, but instead we're gonna we're hoping that there's some questions that we can answer for you and take it from there. But that at a high level is how to do pivots
Yeah,
on
hey
live
Steve,
data.
real fast, first question. Just
Yeah.
a minute ago you were showing saving a view in Snowflake, which is like how you would create a, get the data in the data warehouse. But this is a view in Gigasheet.
This is a
And
view
if
in
you created
Gigasheet.
this view and you and I were on the same team in Gigasheet, could I view your views?
You could. We can, if you're on the same team, it's going to be shared by default, but you can also share these views and send them to other Gigasheet users.
And that's great for when you have like a team of analysts that want to say, "Hey, look, this is what I see. Oh, no, no, here
Exactly.
you can tweak it. You can save it as a new view." And they say, "Well, look, here's what I see." And it's good for collaboration. They live within the sheet. So if you're on the same team, if Steve creates a view, I can go into the sheet and see it, which is pretty neat.
Yep.
And it's basically a way to like bookmark the way you've set up your data. It's the way I'd look at it.
A bookmark is a great way to think of that. Yeah.
Awesome, Steve. Well, thank you. That concludes our demo. So let me share here real fast, Steve, and then we will move to our Q&A. But what we've been talking about today is part of the Gigasheet Enterprise plan. Um, and Gigasheet Enterprise comes with support for up to 1 billion rows. We have 5 editor users and 100 viewers. So viewers are someone that just wants to go in, look at the data. They can change the way it's displayed, but not changing the core underlying data. We do have the ability for the editors to go and edit the data to run functions and formulas, just like in spreadsheets. So like in Excel, we have the ability to do that. We also have AI, which can answer questions for the viewers, but they can also create formulas for the editor. So very cool uh, tool. We also have a team workspace for collaboration. That's what Steve was just mentioning. Any files that we put in our team workspace were automatically shared with our whole team. You share views automatically with your team. You could comment. Basic collaboration tools you'd expect for enterprise software. We also have audit history change log, API. Our API, while some of these tools, the API only allows you to enable new users. Our API actually allows you to automate anything you do in Gigasheet can be automated. That's what I think I mentioned that earlier. We have a services team that helps people with data automation and transformation. And we also are SOC 2 Type 2 compliant, and we have dedicated support for our enterprise customers. So this is the offer we're talking about today. We also, if you want to just go try today, sign up for your free Gigasheet account, and you can connect to your Snowflake instance and give this a try yourself. Our connectors are free. Right now, there's a promotion through the end of the month. And so you can go try it and try both the live query mode and the managed mode where you can just sync some data to the Gigasheet environment. So let's move forward then to Q&A, and Steve and I will try
Yeah.
to tackle all the questions.
So the first question is always the first question. We should just say it at the beginning. Will the recording be made available afterwards to attendees? And the answer
Yes.
is, of course, yes. Absolutely. We will make sure that everyone who's attending here gets the recording, and we're also going to update the slides from now on so that the first slide is like recording will be made available to all attendees. Uh, the next question is, how do you control who has access to what tables? Once connected, do users see everything in the warehouse? I can answer that one, Will, unless you want to.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
So we're going to follow the data governance that is set up in the data repository. So I skipped the authentication step here on the live demo, but at its core, the rights, the tables that I see are the tables that I have been given access to by the Snowflake admin. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel of permissions. We will simply follow the data governance standard already set up by the data repository team. Okay. Next question is, how is it priced? Will, go ahead.
Our Gigasheet Enterprise is priced based on your needs as far as your editors and viewers, and also storage, right? So it depends on how you're setting it up. We'll schedule a meeting, go through, the features that you're looking to use, and come up with a quote based on that.
All right. Can users join data from different sources, like joining BigQuery data with Salesforce data?
Answer to that is absolutely. Now, if you're in live query mode, that is more of a view mode, but in our manage mode where you're making copies, it is very easy to work with data just like you do in a spreadsheet. So I mentioned formulas. Everyone's favorite formula is VLOOKUP. We support a VLOOKUP function where you can go and pull in data from another sheet into a sheet. Uh, so what you would do in this scenario, if we're talking about BigQuery or Salesforce, you would have a connector run and import data from your Snowflake instance and from BigQuery. And then you could use a column to do a VLOOKUP to combine them. We also have other, within our regular product, sheets. We can combine sheets based on column headers. So you could just automatically combine files if you want to do it that way. I view that sort of as stacking data on top of one another, whereas VLOOKUP is more of adding columns. But yes, you can do data manipulation at scale. So the goal, as I mentioned earlier, is to democratize big data. This takes your spreadsheet powers and allows you to use those on big data sources. So yes, absolutely yes to that.
Okay. How big can a sheet be?
Sheet could be up to 1 billion rows.
It's pretty good.
Yep. If you look at our free product, we obviously limit that to a smaller, sample. We really want you to just get in and try Gigasheet. There is a premium product, but the features we're talking about here today, 1 billion rows, big data, and enterprise connectors to Snowflake, we really want to push the 1 billion row boundary with
I mean,
enterprise.
is that a hard limit? Like if I have a sheet with 1 billion and 6 rows, is it going to fail?
We'll put you on with Steve and let him tell you.
It will not fail.
Yeah.
We will be able to work with you on that. It's not a hard limit. Um, is there an API? Somebody asks.
Yes, there is an API. We like to say if you can do it in the UI, if you can do it in Gigasheet, you can do it in the API. And we also can schedule transit transformations and jobs to run for you. So Steve is our expert at automation, and we have quite a few customers that have things like combining files or VLOOKUPs that happen on a monthly basis, so that when they log into Gigasheet, the data is right there, ready for them the way they want to see it and actionable.
Okay. Um, and just scrolling through here, making sure that there's nothing else that we haven't hit. If anybody has any final questions, I think we got that one. We got that one. Um, yeah, I think that those are all the questions I've got. Um, so I think we can end it there.
All right. Thank
Unless
you
you've
all
got
for
thoughts on
attending.
NFL MVP.
NFL MVP?
Yeah,
I don't know the answer to that one. There's a
yeah,
couple candidates.
yeah. Somebody asked that. Good.
I was gonna say thank you for attending today's webinar. As always, we are here to answer your questions, so please reach out and we can do an individual demo. We can look at connecting Gigasheet to your data source. So we are here and happy to set that up and get you going on the product. So thank you for attending.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.